Remember way back then? You knew better, you just didn't say anything. Way back then, you knew that the things that group, that loudmouth and aggressive group, operating right within the neighborhood, you knew that what they had been telling your weaker little brother wasn't true. You just didn't say anything. And why didn't you say anything way back then? Because way back then, you were more afraid of them than you were for him. Had you said something way back then, your weaker little brother wouldn't have taken the risk, wouldn't have gotten caught, and wouldn't have been punished. But that was way back then, and this is right now. Problem is, things haven't changed. And so, did you learn your lesson? Right now, you know better than this, but you just haven't said anything. Right now, you know that this group, this loudmouth and aggressive group, operating right from within the Christian community, you know that what they have been telling your weaker in the faith brothers and sisters isn't true. But you just haven't said anything. Why? Well, what are you more afraid of? Maybe if you better knew the risk that your weaker in the faith brothers and sisters were tempting to take, maybe you'd start saying something now. And I mean right now. Fortunately, the New Testament epistle written by Jude, the Lord's half-brother, a letter written from the heart of a pastor, encouraging his Christian flock for inevitable conflict. Conflict that has always gone hand in hand with being entrusted with the faith. Conflict because there are times when silence is bad. Bad for our weaker in the faith brothers and sisters. Jude will reveal a pattern from God's historical track record, God's unchanging track record, that should motivate you to change yours, starting now, right now. Though you already know all this, I want to remind you that the Lord delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. Let me repeat the last part of that verse pedantically, so Jude's historical pattern argument sinks in. The Lord delivered all of his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed some of them, those who did not believe. Because some of them didn't believe, they didn't believe what God had said. They believed what someone else had said. They took a risk with the golden calf and the debauched lasciviousness accompanying it. It's not like God wouldn't catch them. 3,000 were executed by sword that very day. Then God went through the camp the next day and killed all of the remaining ones who were involved. God's historical track record reveals a pattern. If you risk sinning, especially risking a lascivious sin, even though you're within his community, you risk his judgment. After all, it's not like he won't catch you. Historically, this track record is not limited to just human sexuality. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Let me repeat this verse pedantically, so Jude's historical pattern argument sinks in. And some of the angels that God created, and he created them all, and some of the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. I believe, as many do, that this angelic sin that resulted in a portion of the fallen angels being locked up in Tartarus, it goes back in history to right before the flood. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them who they chose. You understand the euphemistic implication here of married to include marital relations. After locking up these fallen angels, he drowned the humans that were involved. Again, God's historical track record reveals a pattern. If you risk sinning, if anybody risks sinning, especially risking a lascivious sin, even though you're within his community, you risk his judgment. After all, it's not like he won't catch you. Historically, this track record is not limited to heterosexuality. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Homosexuality is a major attack on the church today. Homosexuality, bisexuality, cross-dressing, transgender operations, etc. When we say anything, we're called bigots, homophobes, or even unchristian. Oh well, I know who I'm more afraid of, and I know who I'm more afraid for. So God's historical track record, even just looking at some of the high points, reveals a pattern. If you or anybody risks sinning, especially risking a lascivious sin, heterosexual or homosexual, even though you're within his community, you risk his judgment. After all, it's not like he won't catch you. God's unchanging track record should motivate you to change yours, starting now, right now. Do you want your weaker in the faith brothers and sisters tempted by the infiltrating heretics' perversion of the faith? Do you want them to risk it? It's not like God won't catch them. Do you want to continue to just sit there or stand there and say nothing? What are you more afraid of?